society is always entering the mood that resembles most a mood which is only remembered by the people who are just passing away, right? We are entering a fourth turning, but the people who recall as adults the last fourth turning are just passing away. And so it's interesting when we were entering the late 60s and 70s, a time of awakening, the people who remembered the last awakening were passing away. And so it's fascinating to me that one interesting lesson here is that one of the reasons why history repeats to some extent is that people who remember it are going, right? They're no longer present. So we keep rediscovering this, right? One thing to think about in terms of historical analogs is generational archetypes. And each generation belongs to an archetype. The boomers resemble most the generation that was, the wise old men and women of World War II and the New Deal. These were the generation born after the Civil War. And it's very interesting to think of them when they came of age as, muckrakers and, suffragettes and, passionate reform-oriented individuals from William Jennings Bryan to Jane Addams. The generation that followed them was the lost generation that came of age with the Roaring Twenties, World War One, cynical, pragmatic. Of course, the generation that followed boomers was Gen X. And we talk a lot about the Gen X life story and how in many ways they're similar to the lost. What came after the lost generation? The greatest generation. And we forget their life story, how they were protected and fussed over by protective parents, vitamin pills and playgrounds and Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. They were the straight arrow achievers and they believed in community. 85% of them voted for FDR and the New Deal. They brought about the New Deal politically. And when the nation called, they all went, right, to serve in the cause, right? They conquered half the world in the name of democracy over fascism. Well, millennials have yet to get the call, but it's coming. And the generation after them, well, think about, we sometimes call them Gen Z. In our book, we actually call them Homelander generation because they're born a little bit later than Gen Z is defined. They will be the children of the crisis, right? And what was the generation that they most resemble? The silent generation. And we have a few of them left in politics, right? Nancy Pelosi just stepped down. We have Joe Biden. We have Mitch McConnell. These are people who remember World War II as children. And many of them are still in public life today. They will soon be moving on. But let's remember what that generation brought to the table: expertise, kindness, niceness, a kind of courtesy, and a consideration of the rights of others that we may miss in old people once they're replaced by boomers. We talk a bit in the book about what it's going to be like when the silent are completely gone and you just have boomers occupying that phase of life. But it's very interesting to look at the silent life story, right? Who were very suffocatingly raised as children, came of age as conformist young adults during the late 40s, 1950s, early 60s, came on to preside over the America of the 80s and 90s, a period of no real civic direction, kind of a new splintering of the American public mood. And today, no one would say that they rule with a heavy hand. In fact, if it weren't for Joe Biden, not a single member of this generation would have ever won the presidency. I mean, think about it. They've been completely leapfrogged. But they are a generation which reminded us, and I think even reminds us today, of compromise, consideration, conciliation, living up to the sacrifices that older people have made for you. And I think that same opportunity and burden will eventually, of course, we're looking way into the future, be placed on this new homeland generation of children that's being raised so protectively by ex or parents.